Mr. Hardy home?
Yes, sir, but he's not in.
Hello, this is Patrick here, the author of the Laurel and Hardy blog, and I'm thrilled to be welcoming you back to the Laurel and Hardy blogcast once more. And here we are at episode 8. On today's show, we take a close-up look at the boys' first film released under Hal Roach's new distribution deal with MGM, the 1927 silent short, Sugar Daddies. Joining us to discuss the film is our first returning guest on the podcast, author and film historian Steve Massa. As well as that discussion, we'll also be hearing the views of two members of our Blogheads community as they join us down the line. So grab yourself a plate of beans and a pot of steaming hot coffee, and we'll hop over to New York for today's special guest. Oh, and just a side note about the sound quality, you might detect what sounds like a pneumatic drill in the background, but apparently it was in fact the fan on Steve's computer. So there we go, there's nobody trying to drill through Steve's wall, but hopefully it won't cause too much of a distraction for you. So yeah, off we go, you put the coffee on and I'll do the rest. Our special guest today is our first returning guest onto the podcast. We last spoke to him back on episode 2, and it is, of course, author, film historian, and co-presenter of the silent comedy watch parties over on YouTube, Steve Massa. Steve, welcome back to the Laurel and Hardy blogcast.
Hey, Patrick, thanks for the invite, the re-invite. Thank you.
That's an absolute pleasure. It's great to have you back. It gives me some confidence, actually, Steve, that you've come back. We must be doing something right.
Okay.
So that's great. So, yeah, it's lovely to have you back. So what have you been up to since we last spoke, Steve?
Since we last spoke, Ben Modell and I continue to do the silent comedy watch party every Sunday. And this Sunday we'll be up to episode 35.
Good grief.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, we did the pilot the first week of shutdown in New York, which was around March 14th.
Yeah.
14th. And so we did the pilot. We got it on the air. We didn't know if it would really work technically.
Yeah.
But it all worked out. And then we started the next week, the first official episode. And we've done every week since then. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing it for quite a while longer. But it's a great thing, and the response that we've gotten is tremendous, and people say they really look forward to it, that they really need the laughs, they need the distraction because everything gets pretty grim. So, we're happy to keep doing it. So, we're in the process right now of planning the next few shows as far as what we're going to show, and at least take us through the end of the year, and then we'll work from there. But we just plan to keep going every week.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing it. It is a great service that you're providing to the comedy community. I've certainly been tuning in as often as I possibly can. I noticed a few weeks ago we had Stan Laurel, Oranges and Lemons.
Yes.
Which was great to see. Did you get a good reaction to that one?
Yeah, that got very good reaction. We had another one too. We had Short Orders.
Oh, okay. I missed that one.
A little bit after we had that as well, where he's working in the diner in the restaurant.
Yes.
And they both got, great reactions, and there's a lot of people that haven't seen Stan's solo films.
That's right, yeah, and which is actually quite timely because we've just had news of the Blu-ray release from Lobster.
Laurel Hardy, yeah.
Yeah,
I had my pre-order in already, so
yes, so did I.
I'm excited. Yes. Besides the watch party, Ben Modell and I have this Edward Everett Horton DVD.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Which are two real comedies that he made, which were produced by Harold Lloyd.
Okay.
Was under a company name that Lloyd set up called Hollywood Productions.
Right.
And Harold I think he's between Speedy and Welcome Danger.
Right.
So the shorts were distributed through Paramount because Harold was distributing his films through Paramount. And they're really wonderful. And all of them exist. They were saved from Harold's copies. Harold kept them all. They were in his vault. And in the mid-'70s, they were given to Library of Congress. And so Library of Congress has taken care of them, and they've been scanned, and they've been digitized, and we're cleaning up a little bit, but they really look fabulous. I mean, they have all the Harold Lloyd production values.
Great.
Most were shot by Walter London, who was his regular cameraman, and then directed and written by his regular crew of people. So they're really, very top-notch productions, and Eddie's great, and you get to see him do some action sight gags and things. We don't think of Edward Everett Horton doing that, but he pulls it off well. So
that's fabulous. I only know Edward Everett Horton from Top Hat, Fred Astaire's Top Hat.
Yeah,
and I loved him. I absolutely loved him in that. So this would be great to see him in something of his own.
Well, he did. He had a substantial silent career. He starred in a number of films. 1923, he starred in a silent version of Ruggles of Red Gap that Charles Laughton later did for Leo McCarey.
Okay.
But he starred in about 16 films. Only about 4 of them are known to exist today.
Okay.
But his silent career culminated in these shorts for Harold Lloyd, which came out in 1927 and 1928. And, of course, then Eddie moved into sound films right away and was, a huge success.
Yeah.
And worked until he died in 1970. He worked right up to his death.
Wow. Okay. Oh, that's really interesting. So when can we expect that to be released?
I think the first of the year it'll come out to the Kickstarter contributors.
Right. Okay.
And then it'll be generally available like on Amazon. And places like that. So I'd say early in 2021.
Brilliant. Something to look forward to. Great. That's lovely. That's fabulous. Okay. So we're going to talk today, Steve, if we can, about Sugar Daddies, 1927, the first Laurel and Hardy release, or the first release of the All-Stars through MGM, I should say. It's not Laurel and Hardy yet, of course. Before we actually start looking at the film particularly, what I'd like to just do, actually, whilst I have you and your expertise, your wealth of knowledge on silent comedy, what I'd love to do is actually just ask you if you could give us some context to this period of Sugar Daddy. So it was released sort of early September 1927, because I'm very aware that when we talk about Laurel and Hardy, we often talk about Laurel and Hardy. We don't think about them in the wider context. We think about
the bigger picture.
Yeah, we look at them in a bit of a bubble, and that's not that's not right, really. We should be trying to consider, I think, where they were and where they actually fitted in, in Hollywood, if you like. So if you could just give us a little bit of a snapshot, I suppose, of 1927, who was doing what, who were the major players, what was happening at the studios, that kind of thing. That would be really useful.
Well, I think in silent comedy, the major players were still Chaplin, Keaton, and Harold Lloyd. Yeah. Keaton had just made The General.
Right.
And I think he was working on College probably around this time. I can't remember exactly when it came out. But, of course, The General lost money.
Yeah.
So it was a little tough on Buster at the time. He had to kind of cut back a little bit on College. Yeah. Harold Lloyd, I think, in 1927 was The Kid Brother.
Right.
Which is one of his best features, which is amazing. And it was followed up by Speedy in 1928, which again is one of his best, I think. Yeah. So, Lloyd was really at his peak. And of course, Keaton was too, because The General, fantastic. Yeah. I think Chaplin at this point was between features. The Gold Rush had been in 1925, and he's still working on The Circus.
Circus, that's right, yeah.
And that came out in 28, but he had a pretty difficult time with The Circus. A lot of problems. They started shooting. There was some scratches on the film, so they had to reshoot. They had a fire that burnt down a lot of the circus tent and things. And also, Chaplin was going through his divorce to Lita Gray. Right. Which was, in the newspapers, was a huge scandal and all that. So Charlie was having a pretty rough time. So The Circus was kind of in production for 3 years. Right. So he's still working at this point. Yeah. As far as shorts, Charlie Chase and Max Davidson were doing very well at the Roach lot. Yeah. I mean, they were kind of the kings, and our gang, too. Our gang was doing very well. I mean, I think those were Roach's strongest series. Yeah. Davidson was at his peak around that time. I think this is just before Pass the Gravy. Okay. He was being directed a lot by Leo McCarey at this point. And I think McCarey was about to become director general of the studio. Yeah. I think F. Richard Jones was doing it at this time.
Mm-hmm.
But then Jones would leave, and then McCary would become supervisor.
Yeah.
And, of course, we know how important McCary was to Laurel and Hardy's career.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everything. And then as far as other short subject producing, Max Sennett was busy. He had Billy Bevan and people like that. Lloyd Hamilton, Lupino Lane, Al St. John, they were turning out shorts for Educational Pictures. So there was a lot of comedy. Some that was more low budget. There was a company, Weiss Brothers Art Class, and they had people like Snub Pollard and Ben Turpin, who had been big names, but they were kind of working for Weiss Brothers, which was a little more low budget. Yeah. But there's a lot of silent comedy being produced. And I mean, we're really reaching the peak of silent comedy, 1928, 1929, because Laurel and Hardy were a big part of that with films like Big Business and Pass the Gravy, I mentioned before, with Max Davidson.
Yeah.
And, the Speedy and the Kid Brother and all this, there was a real peak at the very end, before everything switched over to sound.
Yeah, it's almost a shame, isn't it, that Simon came along when it did, because the technology and the techniques that they were starting to use in silent comedies was just, as you say, at its peak. It could have, and where it was going to go from there would have been really interesting to see, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And, it also, the changeover to sound put a crimp in a lot of people's careers.
Yeah.
It's too much for Keaton. He had the difficulty of being at MGM. And even Harold Lloyd, part of that was that he was getting a little bit older, so he wasn't as believable as the young go-getter.
Yeah.
And also the Depression changed things too.
Yeah.
Whereas in the 20s, everybody was real prosperous, and it was all right to kind of be a climber, and really try to work up the ladder. But it wasn't the same in the early 30s. So it kind of threw Lloyd off as well. Of course, Chaplin just ignored sound films and made City Lights in Modern Times. I mean, his only concession is he could write his own scores, which he did. So he just kept doing what he was doing.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of these early sound comedies, two real shorts, where you see them, and a lot of them are shot silent. The long shots or the action scenes are shot silent with sound dubbed over it.
Yeah.
And there's dialogue scenes which were shot,
Yeah, sure. And just going back to the studios, and as you say, Max Sennett, we're still churning them out. And as we were talking about Sugar Daddies, this is the first, as I think I've just said, this is the first release that Hal Roach had under his new arrangement, his new contract with MGM as their distributors. Mm-hmm. And I'm aware that Max Sennett also, they jumped ship from Educational.
Well, it's excuse me, it's interesting because Sennett was releasing through Pathé.
Right.
Had been. So Pathé had both the Roach product and the Sennett product for a number of years. Around 1927, 28, Sennett started making sound films. The sound films came out through Educational, but he continued releasing through Pathé his silent things until like 29.
Right.
Silent. So he kept the silence going with Pathé, but all his sound work came out through Educational.
Right.
A completely different contract and that kind of.
Okay. And what about Lloyd? Because Lloyd was he was with Pathé originally, of course, wasn't he? And then he jumped ship to Paramount. When was that?
Yeah, he made some features for Pathé after he left Roach.
Right. And
then he went to Paramount. Yeah, I think For Heaven's Sake was his first for Paramount, which was, I think, followed by The Kid Brother.
Right.
So he was at Paramount. I mean, he had a very exclusive deal because he was such a huge star.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
The comedy shorts were mostly handled by smaller outfits, like Educational Pictures.
Yeah. And just, I mean, whilst I've got you, we talked a little bit about the stars that were in films at that time. You wrote a book, Slapstick Divas. What was the female contingent doing in 1927? Was there anybody still doing anything of note?
It's interesting because a lot of the ladies who had been clowns, like in the late teens and early 20s, like Alice Howell or Gail Henry or Faye Tincher, they kind of became supporting players.
Right.
By the late 20s. Alice Howell actually retired, but Gail Henry became a crack supporting player.
Right.
A lot of them moved into that kind of supporting player category. Most of the starring leading ladies were more leading lady, actually. But they did some slapstick, but they weren't the clown types.
Yeah.
They were a little prettier, like Dorothy DeVore or Anne Cornwell, Wall, or people like that. And a lot of those films were made by Christie.
Right. Now we'll have a small timeout from the interview with Steve, as it's now time for today's audio blog on Sugar Daddies, filmed May 26th to June 3rd, 1927. It was produced by Hal Roach, directed by Fred Gill, photographed by George Stevens, titles by H.M. Walker. The main cast, along with Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, were of course James Finlayson, Noah Young, Charlotte Minow and Edna Marion. Sugar Daddies heralded the start of a new era for all at the Hal Roach Studios, as it was the first film to be distributed under the newly negotiated deal with Hollywood giants MGM. As Randy Skretvedt explains, unlike Roach's previous distributors Pathé Exchange, MGM could throw a lot of money at Roach's new projects, and they also had a hand in practically every part of the movie business, from the making of the films to their distribution to even owning the movie theatres that would screen them. These must have been exciting times at the studio, full of optimism and potential. It's such a shame then that the first film that Roach handed over to MGM starring Stan and Babe for release was Sugar Daddies. Whilst it's a fairly pleasant farce, it's not particularly funny, managing to raise only a few chuckles. Sugar Daddies is yet another standard Roach All-Stars picture, which is headlined by Stan and James Finlayson, with Babe Hardy supporting quietly in the background. As noted in a number of reviews, the film is practically a rehash of Love 'Em and Weep, with a number of similarities. The film opens with Babe playing the part of butler to Finlayson, who is once again taking on the role of a successful businessman. This time he is oil tycoon Cyrus Brittle. Brittle has apparently had one hell of a night on the town as he's awoken by Babe with a pulsating hangover. The effect of his head pulsating was achieved by using an inflating skull cap, but as this is not exactly discreet, the effect is amusing but probably not in the right way. His hangover is not, however, the only unwanted thing threatening to spoil Finlayson's day and life. Babe the butler informs him that his new wife, Charlotte Minow, is waiting for him downstairs. In a drunken stupor, it appears that Finlayson has met and married a complete stranger, with the barman acting as best man. Not only that, she has a completely gormless daughter in tow and a giant thuggish brother, played brilliantly by Noah Young, brandishing a revolver with which he plans to threaten Finlayson with the purpose of extracting $50,000. Yes, once again, naive businessman Finlayson is the target of blackmailers. There was blood in the water, and the sharks were circling. Realising he has made a humongous mistake, and in a desperate attempt to nullify the marriage, Brittle sends for his lawyer Stan. Sadly and rather frustratingly, looking and acting nothing like the Stanley character he'd been gradually creating over his previous films, he's not even given a name here, apart from our hero. With his slicked back hair and little round pince-nez-style glasses, he actually appears to be reprising his role as the lawyer character from the earlier Charlie Chase short, Now I'll Tell One. The boys have little to do together throughout the film, with perhaps the best scene at the beginning, when Ollie answers the door to Stan and gets rapped on the nose by Stan's knocking umbrella handle for his trouble. Stan then steps inside, and there follows a lovely bit of business where Ollie tries to take Stan's hat against his wishes. Again, unlike the submissive Stanley character, this pre-team Stan will not roll over and show his belly easily. Instead, he's determined to keep his hat on, and succeeds. Ollie is recognisable here, despite some rather fetching sideburns, but his character is still sadly lacking in any resemblance of the Ollie we know and love. We should say that his performance actually is still great, as Babe always was a wonderful actor, regardless of the role, but with our knowledge of what was to come, anything other than our Ollie is always a tad disappointing. The film ambles along in fairly mediocre fashion, and eventually Finlayson, Stan and Babe attempt to flee the murderous blackmailers. The only other part particularly worthy of mention are the scenes leading up to the finale. Noah Young at his grotesquely menacing best, his sister and her daughter are giving chase to our three boys through an amusement park, identified by author and locations expert John Bengston as Venice Amusement Pier. And the pursuit ends up crashing through the House of Fun, which provides a number of small laughs along the way. Arguably, the film's most noteworthy moment is a gag reworked from Love 'Em and Weep, where an unconscious blackmailer, Mae Bush, rides on top of Finlayson's shoulders, covered in a long cloak, and is escorted out of the house by Stan, attempting to fool Finlayson's wife. Here, it is Stan in drag, riding on top of Finlayson's shoulders and escorted through the amusement park by Babe, in an attempt to fool the homicidal in-laws. Extras to look out for in the film include Laurel and Hardy regular Charlie Hall in the background as a hotel guest, Dorothy Coburn in the funhouse, and Villy Latimer is the tall lady mistaken by the cop for Stan on Finlayson's shoulders. The arrival of the first Roach shorts at MGM's offices in New York was heralded with a report in Motion Picture News, August 5th, 1927. Roach shorts for MGM arrive in New York. Prints of the first 3 of the 40 comedies that Hal Roach will make for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer for release during 1927 to 28 are now in New York. These 3 prints represent the first of each of 3 of the 4 series of 10 each. The first to be received is Charlie Chase in The Sting of Stings. The second is an all-star comedy featuring Stan Laurel, Jimmy Finlayson, Oliver Hardy, Edna Marion and Martha Sleeper, entitled Sugar Daddies. The third comedy is the Our Gang vehicle entitled Yale vs. Harvard. Roach's new distributor, MGM, did their best to announce the film with as much pomp and fanfare as possible, with a sizable article featuring in Exhibitor's Herald World, August 20th, 1927, reporting, MGM holds press show. The 2 newest entrants in the short feature field have launched the new season in earnest. Metro has just held a press showing at the Embassy Theatre in New York, and from those who attended come words of praise for the standard of product comprising the short programme. Following are the features shown at the Metro preview. Hal Roach All-Star Series, Sugar Daddies, described as a comedy of exceptional merit. Now, despite the promotional blurb, however, the picture's release was received with some fairly damning reviews, with one exhibitor from the Deluxe Theatre in Kansas describing it in Exhibitor's Herald and Moving Picture World simply as a very poor comedy. Moving Picture World, August 13th, 1927, was a little more positive. Sugar Daddies is a too-real slapstick. It is rough work, but generally amusing. However, Film Daily from August 14th, 1927 probably summed the picture up more accurately than any other. It's an average release, too much rough and tumble business, and not enough laughs is a good way to sum it up as any. Stan Laurel is featured, but calls for no special commendation. Yet again, no attempt was made in this film to use Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy as a double act. But Sugar Daddies would prove to be the very last time that would happen, and the comedy world would never be the same again. We'll be rejoining Steve in just a few moments, but you might recall recently I invited members of the Blogheads community to share with me your thoughts and favourite bits of information on our films in focus. Well, Christopher Jaunsen over in Georgia, USA, had some thoughts that he wanted to share, and we're expecting him to call any moment now.
See who that is.
Hello?
Hi, my name is Chris Johnson, and I'm here to talk about Sugar Daddies.
Just a minute, my friend Mr. Hardy will speak to you.
Hello? Excuse me, please. My ear is full of milk. Pardon the delay, please. But what is the nature of your business?
I want to talk about how I acquired this film. I was a junior in high school in 1997 when I came across Sugar Daddies, of all things, and many other Laurel and Hardy silent shorts at a Suncoast Video, which doesn't seem to exist hardly anymore, just like Blockbuster Video, kind of gone by the wayside over the years. But I located Sugar Daddies along with Unaccustomed As We Are, and I believe You're Darn Tootin'. And of course, I couldn't wait to see and get my hands on those videos because I had not seen hardly any silent footage of the boys besides seeing them in books and seeing clips from Dom DeLuise's tribute to The Boys, that was really the first time I had seen any kind of silent footage. Up until that point, I had just seen, of course, their classic sound shorts and features that were sporadically on TV and through library rentals, but never had I seen any silent footage. So really 1997 through Michael Ag's Nostalgia Archives print or video releases, I should say, those were the first time that I was able to see any silent films. So it was really great. So at the time, even though overall, it's a poor film, I have great memories of actually seeing it for the first time, just because of that fact, because they were hard to see. So getting back to the film itself, based on the print that Nostalgia Archive put out, it's kind of murky in the beginning. I think that works pretty well for that James Finlayson bald cap going in and out routine, because if we could see it better, I feel like the skull cap he wears would be a lot more obvious, and so I think actually the bad quality helps that out a lot. I love the scene when Stan comes in. He's in a weird character here, but I love the scene where he comes in and he's trying to take off his hat, or Ollie's trying to take off his hat, and he takes it off, and the timing right there is genius. And too bad the rest of the film doesn't live up to that scene, because that's a pretty good start, even though they're not playing as a team. But yeah, Stan's character here, the glasses character, I'm not sure what he was going for. It's the same character he was playing in Now I'll Tell One, and it seems like something that would make for a character more than a leading role kind of thing. So I'm glad he dropped it. I don't think he was going to go anywhere with that character. The best part of the movie, I'm not a fan, by the way, of the bending over thing and putting somebody on top, which was done in Love 'Em and Weep, and then again, Chickens Come Home. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't get it, and I don't get how anybody would believe it, but I guess it's so ridiculous they kept doing it. But the scenes in Long Beach Pike, they are great. And obviously Hal Roach Studios would use that again in like Charlie Chase's Life Hesitates at 40 in 1936, and to a really wonderful advantage in Thelma Todd and Zazu Pitts' On the Loose in 1931. Of course, it has a Laurel Hardy cameo, and I can't wait, Patrick, for you to get to those films, but it's a long way to go yet. In any case, yeah, those Long Beach Pike scenes are really cool, but based on what Hal Roach shows of it, it seems like all that area is good for is for women's dresses to fly up. Seems like anytime it's in one of these Hal Roach films, that's what ends up happening. But anyway, I guess I can't complain about that too much. But anyway, so thanks, Patrick, for allowing the listeners to submit these entries. And keep on going, and thanks very much for a wonderful podcast. Thanks, Patrick. Have a good one.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much, Christopher, for getting in touch. It was great to hear from you. All being well, we should be hearing from another blockhead before the episode is over, but for now, let's see what Steve Massa had to say about today's Film in Focus. Okay, so if we can talk a little bit then about Sugar Daddies, Steve, that would be great. So,
sure.
What are your general thoughts on Sugar Daddies, just as a fan?
Well, I've always liked Sugar Daddies. I know people who don't, but I've always liked it. I think I first saw a chunk of it in one of the Robert Youngson compilations. I can't remember which one. I think it was Further Perils of Laurel and Hardy. There was a big section of it. So that was the first time I saw it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I was a teenager, and then I had never seen any of the silent Laurel and Hardys at that point, only the sound films. But I thought it was great, and I still like the film. I think, it's a little bit warmed over Love 'Em and Weep.
Yeah.
I think the plot's a little similar.
Yeah.
Pete the gag of Stan, sitting on Finlayson's bent over, and that whole thing, wearing the long coat. They repeat that gag.
Yes.
Which they would repeat in Chickens Come Home, which
that's right.
Of Love 'Em and Weep.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good one, because there was a move at the time at Roach, where they were starring Jimmy Finlayson
Yeah.
in a lot of the all-star comedies. And I think this is a good one with him as the lead.
Yes.
Really well. It has a great supporting cast. There is one early hat routine when Stan comes in and Ollie as the butler tries to take his hat and Stan keeps taking it back. It's not fully extended like it would be later.
Yes.
Sort of the beginning of a hat routine.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I think Leo McCarey helped with those because in a lot of his later films, Duck Soup and The Awful Truth, there are hat routines.
Yes, of course.
And Ruggles of Red Gap. So I think he was very fond. So he was very much a proponent of the hat routines. So I do like the film. I like the locations, at the amusement park, the amusement pier and stuff.
Yeah. And of course, Charlotte Mino was also in Love 'Em and Weep, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. And she's great. I mean, she's a real silent comedy veteran. I mean, she started, I think, I can't remember the first studio she worked for. It was either Selig or Majestic. But around the early teens, she was a regular at S&A's studio in Chicago.
Right.
And she was in their George Ade Fable series that they did. And she's in Chaplin's first film for S&A, His New Job.
Okay.
And she eventually ended up in California, and she worked for Chaplin again. She's in a number of his Mutual comedies.
Right.
She's in Easy Street. She's in The Floor Walker. She's in a bunch of those. But then she goes over to Senate. And she stayed at Senate until the early 20s. And she worked a lot with Jimmy Finlayson.
Okay.
Because they were there together.
Yeah.
So they had actually worked together quite a bit. And then, of course, she's in a number of the Roach films. And she would appear in features. She's very good in Mary Pickford's Sparrows. Right. And it's a completely against type character. She plays the wife of this guy that has a baby farm, this really terrible, she's this harridan. I mean, you wouldn't believe it's the same actress.
Right.
She gives a really excellent, so she was a really great performer.
Yeah.
She continued working at Roach and other places into the early 30s, but then she kind of retired.
Right. Okay. And of course, we've got Noah Young back again.
It's always, and yeah. Noah's always a treat. I mean, he's great. I mean, nobody does what Noah did better than he does. I mean,
yes.
The early Harold Lloyd films and all through. I mean, he's in so much of the Roach shorts.
Yeah.
Pollard, Paul Parrott, and he's always the big. I think my favorite is Do Detectives Think, where he's Tipton Slasher.
That's right. Yes,
that's my favorite. But yeah, he's great, and Edna Marion too.
Yeah,
she plays Charlotte Minot's daughter. Unfortunately, she doesn't have very much to do.
Yeah,
in this film because she's excellent, and she had come from vaudeville. She was in shows with I think it was Gus Edwards, and she worked a lot. She had Century Comedy. She had her own series. She was a star for like 3 years, right. And then moved around. She went to Christie and Educational, ended up at Roach. But at Roach, they kind of made her as a supporting player.
Yeah.
She supports Charlie Chase or she supports Laurel Hardy. They didn't star her in any of her own comedies, which is kind of unfortunate. And after she left Roach in 28, Roach did a strange house cleaning where he got rid of Edna Marion, Viola Richard, and Dorothy Coburn.
Yeah.
I mean, why? But they all went to different places, and Edna did. She appeared in some features, but by the early 30s, she seemed to lead pictures. I think she married well.
Yeah.
So, and got out of pictures.
Right.
So, an excellent cast. And the cop is very good. Bud Fine.
Yeah.
He's the cop, and he has the ending gag where he pulls up the woman's skirt.
He's quite a fresh policeman, isn't he? That guy. He's quite happy just to lift up his skirt.
And the man that's with the woman at the very end is Eugene Pallett.
Okay.
Who was doing a number of Roach things at that time. He's a little bit thinner than he could be in the 30s.
Right.
And all woman is a woman named Billy Latimer.
Right.
Who Stan Laurel seems to be very fond of because he used her in a lot of his own solo comedies. And she's in Love 'Em and Weep, too. She's got a little part in that.
Yes, of course. Was she the nosy neighbour?
Yes.
Yes, that's right. I remember.
So
I thought I recognised her.
Yeah, Stan seems to be that he was very fond of her, used her a lot.
Yeah, she's got a very distinctive face, hasn't she? I suppose
yes,
that's probably
yeah, it's a nice way. But she's good, and she's one of those people that, made up the fabric of the silent comedy universe.
Yeah.
He turn up, doesn't matter what studio, they turn up anywhere, and they're always good. They always get their laughs, they always do what they need to do.
Yeah.
Whether it's create tension for the comedian, comic tension or whatever, but they're always good.
Yeah, and what do you think about the performances, Steve? Stan and Babe themselves, because obviously we've come off the back of Do Detectives Think, which was really almost stereotypical Stan and Ollie.
Yeah, teamwork,
and then we detoured into the Stone Age just for a very quick flying elephants.
Well, I think Ollie does a pretty good job as the butler, although there's not enough of him.
Yeah,
I mean, doing business, that's more in the opening.
Yes, yeah.
Out of him doing business where he gives Jimmy Finlayson the ice for his throbbing head, which is all funny, that gag. But Stan, for Stan, it's a real turn backward.
Yeah.
Because he's more like the aggressive Stan from earlier. And that lawyer character he plays in a Charlie Chase film, Now I'll Tell One, which is not long after this.
Yes.
He turns up with the glasses on his nose. And he actually kind of did that character in a couple of his Joe Rock comedies as well.
Right.
Where he has the glasses on his nose. And
that's right.
The character is a little aggressive for me. I think Stan's funnier where he kind of takes a back seat and is much more passive. Yeah,
I think the one exception to that, I do like Sailors Beware, when he's Chester Chase, the cab driver, and he's got a little bit about him. He does his little crying routine. If he pushes his point, then he gets told off, and then does his cry. So it's he's not totally aggressive.
And that's the one following this, at least as far as the release schedule, I think.
Oh, okay. Yes, I was going to say, they filmed it certainly way before, but of course, Pathé was a bit unusual with the way they released, weren't they? That's very true.
Yeah,
because I think. Also, this was out in theatres at the same time. I was looking at in some of the contemporary newspapers, and it was in the same time. Leave 'Em Laughing was showing at the same time as this, and there was another one as well. You can't kind of understand really why they were sort of messing around with the release dates on this, because
I don't. It must have been. It must have been some kind of studio business. Yeah, I don't understand either.
Really, really strange. And we just touched briefly on the locations of Sugar Daddies.
Yes. It was Venice Pier.
Right. I was going to say, because for years, I always thought it was Coney Island. I just thought, it's the same as Harold Lloyd, because they have that big rotating tube that they go through.
Well, it was John Bankston in his book Silent Traces.
Yeah.
Definitely identified it as Venice Pier because Chaplin shot the opening of the circus there.
Ah, right.
Noah's Ark, but then also he's running around, and John, put side by side two photos with the same architecture.
Right.
And from Sugar Daddies at the end.
Yeah.
And that slide that they go down, it's a slide, that's in the crowd. That's in the opening of the crowd, the King Vidor film, because they supposedly, that's set in New York, and they go to Coney Island.
Ah, right.
Venice Pier filled in for Coney Island, but they used that slide as well.
Right.
And that was at Venice Pier.
Okay, that's interesting.
Randy Skredved said it was somewhere else, but
okay.
John says it's at the Venice Pier, and it matches up to the circuit. So
okay, well, we can't really argue with John, to be honest, on locations, can we?
No, I know that's his thing.
Because I know. Obviously, this Sugar Daddies, that predates Speedy. Then Speedy was 1928, I think, wasn't it? And I also found it interesting. I think the first Roach product that was handed over to MGM was Charlie Chase's The Sting of Stings. Uh-huh. And that was also set at a sort of an amusement park.
Yeah, it's kind of a carnival kind of thing.
Yeah,
there's a strong man, and there's all this...
on the rides and things, the Ferris wheel. Is there some kind of a vogue for amusement parks around about that time? Or is that just complete coincidence?
I think it's a coincidence, but you're right that a lot of them were turning up in films. There's another film the Universal made, Lonesome, with Glenn Tryon.
Right.
And that's a very important scene at an amusement park.
Right.
And even, I think Sunrise has a scene in an amusement park too. So there was something that was happening in Hollywood at this time.
Yeah. I quite like Sugar Daddies. It's just like, I think it's a shame that it's a step back certainly for Stan's character. I think there are some great performances in it. Noah Young is brilliant as usual. I love that cigar chewing scene at the start when he's introduced with his leg just lolloped over the side of the chair.
And I think Finn is very good. Finlayson's very funny too. Always.
Yeah. He's just so dependable, isn't he, Finlayson? And also what I found quite interesting as well, I was looking at I was reading the title cards as they come up. And then also you have in the background, Babe is talking to Finlayson, and I think he's telling him that your wife is downstairs, which comes up on the title cards. And then the next title card, I think Finlayson is supposedly saying to him, is she blonde, is she brunette, or something like that. But I think what Babe's actually saying, when you're looking at his body language, is there's a big guy, he's tall and he's wide.
Oh, yeah, he mimes like a big guy. And then he mimes a small woman. Or he mimes
that's right, yeah.
Small, which is Edna Marion.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, he mimes like the whole family.
Yeah, I love that. I was listening to an interview with Anita Garvin. It was an American radio interview, I think, from the 1980s. And the guy asked her, when you were in the silent movies, did you have scripts? What were you actually saying? Were you told what to say? And she just said, no, we just had to say whatever we felt natural to say. So it's just
in the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating to be able to get those recordings if for whatever reason they were
that would be
it'd be great.
That would be amazing. I mean, I know with a lot of these that they had an outline, they had a script, but it was more situational. This situation leads to this situation.
Yeah.
It's Frank Capra, who was a Senate gag man before he became a director, said, the plot was always just sort of a clothesline to hang gags. But so they would just, they knew what the situation was, so they would just play it. So they would say whatever seemed, in keep. A lot of improvisation that way.
Yeah.
I think that creates a lot of spontaneity.
Absolutely, which was key, of course, for the comedy. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because it's really happening. And I think, they had the big gag sequences worked out. They knew, But even, I know, in the 30s, Stan and Babe really didn't rehearse.
Yeah.
Because I think it was Henry Brandon, who was playing Barnaby in Babes in Toyland. And it was his first film. Yeah. And it was his first day, and this first day on the set, and they're going to do something, and they were getting ready to shoot. And Brandon said, "Aren't we going to rehearse?" And he said, "Oh, God, no, that'll just ruin it." So, they like to just try and get it on the first take and keep it fresh. Yeah,
well, it certainly worked. It's absolutely superb stuff. So then, of course, we disappear from the non-Laurel and Hardy films, and as I understand it, the second 100 Years is their first team comedy, and from there everything just goes up, doesn't it? They really sort of enter the stratosphere, I guess.
Yeah, finally, right.
So I know
there were a lot of stops and starts, the back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely.
More of a team, but then they'd be separated again. And back.
That's right.
Oh well, come easy, go easy. That's my motto.
What do you mean, come easy, go easy? Now we've got to start all over again, right at the bottom.
Why don't we start at the top?
And before we leave Sugar Daddies, there's just time for the thoughts of another one of our blogheads, as promised. So here is Graham Wale from the UK, and here's what he thinks about the film.
What do you think of it?
Although not considered their best work, I personally quite enjoy seeing the boys playing different roles than normal. Maybe because I've seen them play the Stan and Ollie characters we know and love so many times that I enjoy seeing them as actors able to play other roles. Similar to how I like Rowan Atkinson as Mr. Bean and Edmund Blackadder, although they are very different characters. This has led me to start watching the many solo films the boys did, as they are becoming more readily available. My favourite part in Sugar Daddies is early on between the boys involving Stan's hat. It's perfectly timed and very funny. I love to see real people's life history in these old films, and the scene later on that sees them leave the hotel with Stan on Finn's back, a crowd is watching. It seems to me the crowd are watching are not extras but average people watching the filming. I always find myself watching a young boy who follows them for a bit as they walk, puzzled by what they are doing. It appears that the main purpose of amusement parks in the 20s and 30s was to devise ways of getting women's skirts to fly up. Amusement parks seem to feature in many of Hal Roach comedies, my favourite of which is On the Loose, starring Zazu Pitts and Thelma Todd, which the boys make a brief cameo in. This time, though, Pitts and Todd have been on so many dates to Coney Island that they know how to dodge all the pitfalls, including not having their skirts blown up. There are some great shots of Noah Young menacingly walking towards the camera after the boys by cinematographer George Stevens, this being one of his earliest of a number of Laurel Hardy shorts that he would work on. George, who had become one of the most influential filmmakers of the 20th century, moved into directing his own films in the 1930s. He filmed some of the best colour footage of World War II, and his films of the newly liberated Dachau concentration camp will be used as evidence in the Nuremberg trials. After the war, he directed classics like Shane and Giant, for which he won an Academy Award for Best Director, but Laurel Hardy was where he started. Overall, Sugar Daddies is a fun visual comedy with Ollie playing a butler with more dignity than his employer and Stan reprising his professor character that I personally have a soft spot for.
Isn't that swell?
So I know you've been a long time Laurel and Hardy fan, Steve. You said that on the previous podcast, that and Stan was such an inspiration to you. What can you just sort of sum up? What is it to you that is so special about Laurel and Hardy? What is it that makes you think they've lasted so long?
Well, I think they're definitely unique as a comedy team because they're not both comedians. I see them as both being straight men, because they play everything so serious.
Yes, yeah.
So they're not working. I mean, they are working for laughs, but they don't act like they're working for laughs.
Yeah.
They're in the situation. They're in the relationship. And that's what I like about them, because it's so, the comedy just happens easily. It just sort of happens naturally.
Yeah.
And it's these two foolish characters, but they're very believable.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
But there's a number of comedians that push.
Yeah.
Especially in sound films, some of the heavy dialogue comedians that are always pushing with the one-liners and that gets tiresome after a while, unless you really, like the Marx Brothers, it can be really brilliant, like The Great Show. But, oddly enough, I love Charlie Chase in the silent films.
Yeah.
But I'm not a big fan of his sound films because I think he pushes too much.
Yeah.
With the dialogue. I think he may not have been as comfortable in the silence. But he pushes a lot. Some of the Roach films are quite good of his sound film. But when he gets to Columbia, I really don't care for those. And I'm sure people are going to be very upset say that. But I think the Columbia films outside of the heckler just really aren't good. And it bothers me, too, that Charlie, he's either got gray hair, white temples, or his hair is obviously dyed, and everybody's saying, young man, they're referring to him. And it's like, no, he's not anymore.
Yeah.
But I just don't, I guess I just don't like those pushy sound comedians as much.
No, and I think also it highlights, I guess, the fact that, silent comedies are just so much more, I don't know, they're very endearing. I think when you get into the characters, because they're not burdened by the dialogue, you're not distracted by the dialogue, you're looking more at very much physicality. And I guess the comedians also, or the actors in a way, they've got to sort of, they've got to put across by their own physicality, their characterizations. So they work it hard, and it just, I don't know. I think, as you say, Chase certainly, I think, is much better in silence. I would agree with that. Yeah,
I think those films are so well made.
Yeah.
Clever, and they're so well made.
Yeah, and with Laurel and Hardy, I mean, it upsets me quite a lot when you hear a lot of fans of Laurel and Hardy. They don't care for the silent. They don't even bother with the silent films, and that they're just missing so much. there's so much fabulous stuff gone into the silent comedies, and they wouldn't be the team that they are in the talkies without those silent films.
No, it's true. And but they were really lucky. Not lucky, but they, the way they made that great transition. But they had already been slowing down the pace of silent comedy, where they had their tit for tat sequences where they would do something to Finlayson, then they would wait for him while he retaliated, and then take their turn, whether it's Big Business or Two Tars or whatever. Yeah. So they were already slowing down the pace to more of a sound pace.
Yeah.
So when sound came in, they just moved ahead so easily. Their voices were perfect.
Yeah. I was thinking the other day as well, I think that the transition to talkies was their first challenge, of course, which they just took in their stride, no problem. And then they had another challenge that came through with the length of the films. I've just written a blog on Bo Hunk's 4-reeler. And it's at that point where the double features are starting to get very popular in theaters. Mm-hmm. So the shorts are getting harder to sell because they're getting squeezed out by the double features. So what do they do?
Double features.
And so they have to increase to three reels. Then they go to 4 reels. And then they draw back in again, and they go back to 2-reelers. We see hardly any more 3-reelers, no more 4-reelers, and then they come into into just features. And again that transition they seem to take very well as again. Yeah. The features, I think everyone's got a different opinion, but the features are never as good as the short subjects, the 2-reelers, but they still make that transition. I think it's a credit to them and to how well they could adapt to different situations and circumstances, and that's the longevity, isn't it? If you can adapt and change, you
make it work or find ways to make it work.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, the transition that didn't work so well is when they left Roach after Saps at Sea.
I didn't want to mention that.
But, they didn't have any control, so they couldn't but there.
But having said that, there are people that love those later films.
Well, I know a lot of people that's the first Laurel and Hardy films they saw.
Yeah.
Like Great Guns or The Big Noise. They saw them on television.
Yeah.
And they liked them.
Yeah.
But they saw their signature films and like those even more.
Yeah.
But they did like Laurel and Hardy in those Fox or those late MGM films.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was their first exposure.
That's right. I think Rob Stone actually he said that in the episode 1. He found them through the later films. I know my friend Greg Taylor. He also loves The Big Noise. That's one of his favorite films, and everybody looks at him as if he's gone mad. But, but this is what I really like about that is, and this goes through the silence, the shorts, the talkies, everything, is the fact that you may not like a film, you may quite, very much dislike a film, but somebody else will love it. Yeah. I think that's what I love about it. Just films in general, I suppose. It is so subjective. I don't like Early to Bed. I really, really find that very hard to watch because of the nature of the film. Yet I know there are people that absolutely adore Early to Bed. And that's brilliant. And I love that. I think that's such a great thing.
That's the nature of art,
Yeah.
I always say, what is it? One man's Monty Banks is another man's Buster Keaton. So, it's people respond to different things. So
yeah, absolutely.
At last, you're using my brain.
2 more questions for you, Steve. I have 2 questions before I let you go.
Okay.
The first one really is a guest plug. Is there anything any projects you're working on? Anything you want to give a shout out to? Just while we have you have our ears.
Well, we mentioned the watch party, so that's ongoing every Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. New York time.
Yep.
It's various times in different parts of the world, but are archived on YouTube, so you can watch. You could even binge watch them if you desired. But so that's going. I'm working on a new book.
Oh, which
is a sequel to my first book, Lame Brains and Lunatics.
Okay.
So this is Lame Brains and Lunatics 2.
Yep.
It's new essays.
Right.
Because that was a book of essays about different obscure aspects of silent comedy. So these are new essays about different obscure aspects. So I'm busy working on that. That will be out until 2022. I've been doing some webinars for Niles Film Museum, and I have one actually tonight for the National Arts Club, talk about slapstick divas. But that'll be over by the time this airs. So,
and you can't go back to watch those afterwards. Is that just it's a live stream? And that's it.
Well, I know the Niles material is up on their YouTube site.
Okay.
And I'm not sure about the National Arts Club, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But,
okay, well, your very final question, and probably the most important question that I'm going to ask you today, Steve, of course, is the atoll question. So you are about to be stranded on a deserted atoll, but you are going to be allowed to keep with you 4 items. You have a Laurel and Hardy silent short, talkie short, feature film, and a Laurel and Hardy book. So what are you going to keep with you, and why?
Okay. Well, for the silent short, I would pick That's My Wife.
Oh, yes. Yes.
That's my favorite of their silents.
Yeah.
I find it hilarious. I think it's just one of their greatest. And it's a little overlooked. I think it's hilarious. Yeah. I mean, Stan and Babe were never better. I think it's Stan's best performance in drag, which he did a lot. And so I think it's really funny. The nightclub scene. William Courtwright, who plays Uncle Vernal, is fantastic. I mean, he's just perfect.
Yeah.
So that would be the silent.
That is a really good shout. I love that. I'm so glad you've chosen that one because, as you say, it's very overlooked. If
I try to show people a Laurel and Hardy silent, that's one of the ones I always think of first.
Do you really? Yeah, that's great.
Because I think it just shows off, what they could do at the peak. Again, that's the peak of the silent days.
Yeah, funnily enough, when I was watching Sugar Daddies, there's that little bit in the amusement park where they're on the dance floor, and straight away I was just wanting it to be another one of those that's my wife sequences, because that dance.
Oh yeah, that's just hilarious.
Brilliant, and I just love Babe's face when he's just trying to be discreet with it all.
But that reminds me, before we move on to the sound short, one thing I wanted to mention about Sugar Daddies was George Stevens' camera work, because there's a lot of handheld camera work, like when they're on the dance floor, or down the slide, and the camera's like moving all over the place. Almost everything, any short you'll see that George Stevens shot in the late 20s, you'll see something where he gets in some kind of fancy camera work.
Oh, that's a good shout. Okay.
Handheld camera work.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that, because he does on the dance floor and a couple places he gets in this really effective, handheld camera stuff.
Yes, he's following the boys as they're dancing, isn't he? When they're doing that little sort of back and forth.
And Noah Young's coming towards him too. He follows him, and I think he does. There's some in the hotel lobby, and also on the slide. There's some handheld stuff where somebody's coming at somebody, or people. Jostling each other around.
Was there a lot of that kind of technique used in the silent days with handheld?
Well, yeah, there were in features and things like that, but not in comedy shorts.
Yeah,
really, not that kind of handheld where it really calls attention to the camera work. Because usually the thing with the silent comedy is to not call attention to the camera work.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's a good shout. I like that. That's great. Okay, so we'll move on to your talkie short.
Oh, well, my favorite, and there's a lot, great, is Busybodies.
Great, yeah.
Because it's just kind of undiluted Stan and Ollie kind of goofing around, really.
What do you think you're trying to do? Can't you take a little joke? Why don't you look where you're going? Clumsy.
All the bits with the window frame, and it's just, I love the gag with the saw cutting the car in half at the end.
Yeah.
So and I love the gag too, where the the building, the shed collapses, and they're there, and they hear the knock, and it's Tiny the door and Tiny Sanford's, because that gag, Jerry Lewis does that in The Nutty Professor.
Yeah.
There's an explosion at the opening of the film in his classroom, and the secretary is looking for him, and she's standing on like the whole door frame fell over, and you hear the knock, tap, 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 and she opens it, and Jerry's inside. So you can see that's one of the things where Lewis was influenced by Laurel.
Definitely. And that lovely bit where they've fallen off the ladder at the end, and he's still got hold of his ears.
Can you let go of my ears?
Oh yeah. He's pulling his ears. Yeah. No, it's a great short.
Oh, superb! That's a great choice. Great choice. And your feature film?
Well, this will be like a lot of people's choice. I think is Way Out West.
Yeah.
I'm very fond of Sons of the Desert, which I think is their other classic short. But something about Way Out West, I love the musical numbers. I think they're great. The number that Sharon Lynn does at the opening.
Yes.
Will you be my lovey-dovey, my little honey lamb? We could be land cool, the way our lover blue. Will you be my ducky-wucky, my little sugar pie? I'll never make you blue, I'll be so sweet to you.
Of course, the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. I wish there was another number. They do the number at the very end, but it's kind of truncated. It's just a short thing with Rosina Lawrence, but and of course their dance. Side. But the comedy is great. I love the getting the deed scene.
Say, you slugs, what do you mean busting in here like this?
We want to know why you are not Mary Roberts.
I'll take care of this matter.
So you got wise, huh? Well, if it's the stage you're after, you're just out of luck. Get that back!
Take it, Stan! Beat it!
Where they're, with they're grabbing the deed and they're running around, and it's brilliant. The choreography and that business where they go, ha ha, ho ho, hee hee.
Yes.
It's great. There's so much in that film. And I think as a feature, it's very consistent all the way through.
Yeah.
It works really well. There are no subplots. There's no lovers. It's just, really undiluted Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah. It's a great choice. And as you say, it is a very popular choice.
I'm sure.
I think everybody so far has chosen Way Out West.
Really?
For very good reason. Yeah. It is. It's really the perfect film, isn't it? It's probably a perfect film, I think. I don't think there's no wasted moments.
I agree. And it's a Stan Laurel production.
Yes, of course.
In the credits.
Of course, which is nice to see. Brilliant. And your final selection you have, sir, is going to be. I'm going to add another one onto this, so stand by. But yes, your next one is a book, Laurel and Hardy related book.
Yeah, this is an easy one. It's Randy Skredved's Laurel and Hardy, the magic behind the movies, the new deluxe edition.
Of course.
I had the original, which I was thrilled with. I thought it was fantastic. And of course, Randy did the update, which is, mind-boggling.
Yes.
So, that is my favorite. There was a Laurel and Hardy book by Charles Barr.
Yes.
Years ago. And I always liked that book because he used frame grabs.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Which nobody was doing.
Yeah.
But that book, I think, came out in the 60s or 70s. But that's a lot of fun. That's very good. But my choice would be Randy's book.
Yeah, the mother of all updates. I don't think any book has been updated more than that one. Nope. It is a fabulous volume, isn't it?
Really ultimate.
Yeah. And with fingers crossed, all being well, we're having Randy Skretbet on the next episode of the blogcast. So that will be great fun. Looking forward to that.
So which film is he doing?
We are looking at Second 100 Years.
Oh, great. Okay.
And again, all being well, we're also going to take a look at, I think, Call of the Cuckoo. And I'm also going to try and get Hats Off as well. I'm going to try and cover 3 with Randy whilst I've got him. And then I'll probably split that into a couple of episodes. And then so Randy coming up for a Christmas special in December.
Oh, great.
Really nice. That'd be really nice. So fabulous. I was going to give you one last thing to keep with you on your island, Steve.
All right.
And this is going to be a tricky one for you. I'm going to let you keep another silent film, another silent comedy. And it could be any silent comedy.
Oh, so it doesn't have to be Stan and Ollie.
No. You can have a bit of variety on your island.
Well, I would pick Sherlock Jr.
Oh, great.
Keaton feature, because that's my favorite. And I saw that early. I saw that in the 70s. Raymond Rohauer had put it out like on the college circuit.
Right. It
was on a double bill with The Hound of the Baskervilles, the 1939 Fox film with Basil Rathbone.
Yeah.
They put them together, and it was Ohio State University, but there was a college cinema there, and that's where I was already a Keaton fan.
Yeah.
Because I had seen the Black Hawk releases of Cops in 1 week, but I think I had only seen The General as far as features at that point.
Yeah.
And then I saw Sherlock Jr. in 35 millimeter on a big screen. It just completely blew me away. And it's always my favorite. I think it's just, it's just the gags and the technical brilliance of the scenes where the backgrounds are changing on Buster after he goes into the film. And
that's right.
It's just great. It's just,
And when he falls asleep in the projection booth, and then he sort of comes out of himself, and you can see those two.
Oh, it's great. He comes out of himself, and he starts to go out, and his hat's hanging on the wall.
Yeah.
And it's a phantom hat. He pulls a phantom hat and puts it on.
Yeah. Genius.
So, this is like detail. And the ending, when the girl comes, when Catherine Maguire is solved, that the guy stole the necklace or whatever it was, Buster, and she comes, and so they're shot through the window of the projection booth, and you see, he kisses her, but he's watching the film that's running to get his cues on what he should do.
Yeah.
So he kisses her, he looks at the film, and he's hugging, so then he does it. And then, of course, he gets kind of left high and dry, because then there's a fade, and the hero's sitting with two babies on his lap, and Buster's scratching his head because he doesn't know how that happened. So it's great, It's
a great film.
Yeah, it's a great film.
And if any of our listeners have not seen Sherlock Jr., you have to watch Sherlock Jr. It is a great film. Is that the one where Keaton actually breaks his neck in the filming on that water spout?
There's a scene where he's on the top of a train. And freight train, and he comes to the end because it's moving, and he's running on the top.
Yeah.
And he leaps into the air, and he grabs. There's a spout. There's a big water tank.
Yeah.
Spout. He grabs the rope on the spout that lets loose the water. So when he grabs the rope, it lets loose the water, and it knocks him. He drops onto the tracks.
Yeah.
Supposedly his neck hit the railroad track. And
that's right.
Fractured his neck. But he gets up and runs out of the scene by a couple of guys. And he said he had some headaches right after. And then it didn't bother him. And then like 10, 15 years later, he had a complete physical, and they did x-rays, and they found the fracture, that he had a fracture in his neck.
Incredible. What a guy. Look, you've got to love Buster Keaton.
Yeah.
Out of this world.
Amazing.
Out of this world. Brilliant. Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure once again to chat with you. Hopefully it won't be for the last time. I will call on you again at some point, if that's
great.
okay with you.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for all of your knowledge that you've passed on. And we'll speak to you soon. Stay safe and keep laughing. Great stuff.
You too.
Thank you,
all
Steve.
Right.
Brilliant.
Bye-bye.
And so there we have it. We've reached the end of yet another episode. Next time, in episode 9, we'll be looking at the first film featuring Stan and Babe as an official team, the second 100 years. We've finally made it through the pre-team phase, and the boys are about to hit the big time, so I'm really looking forward to that. And if that's not all, our special guest for episode 9, all being well, will be none other than Mr. Laurel and Hardy himself, Randy Skretvet, and I cannot wait for that. So make sure you don't miss it by clicking that subscribe button, and that way you'll also receive every new episode as soon as it's released. So thank yous to everyone involved in today's show, Christopher Jaunsen, Graham Wale, and the wonderful Steve Massa, of course. Thank you as usual to the fabulous Bohunks Orchestra. CDs of their music can be purchased by clicking the affiliate links on the Laurel and Hardy blog website, and also if you visit the Laurel and Hardy blog Amazon store as well. And finally, thanks again to you for being here with me. Keep your comments and reviews coming in. It really keeps me going. And so that's all for episode 8. So it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.